Imagine this. Your favorite candy bar that costs only $2 has been inflated to $10 because they wanted to sell another candy bar for cheaper because that company needs money. Would you pay 5 times the price of your favorite candy bar just so that other candy bar can be sold for cheaper? Of course not. So in order for the colleges to pay athletes, some would result to raising the tuition rates. So similar to that, you wouldn't want to pay more for your tuition just because they're wanting to pay for their athletes to play. Therefore, the NCAA athletes themselves and other students could be in serious trouble if the NCAA athletes were to be paid. As I talk about tuition rates, the purity of the game, and the athlete's education, we'll notice that there are a few problems. First, I would talk about the tuition rates. Tuition rates will have to go up for some colleges because changes to how student athletes are paid could lead to some schools stuck with nowhere else to turn to raise student fees according to time. That means that especially the smaller schools, they all have to raise their tuition rates even higher because they don't have much funding as it is. And if the tuition rates rise, then some of the students won't be able to afford college. And if some students can't afford college, then most likely they won't be able to afford it or be able to get a well-paying job. And if they can't get a well-paying job, then they won't be able to make much money. And if they can't make much money, how are they going to house and feed their families? But if the colleges find some other way to raise tuition rates, we won't have to worry about that. Next, we'll be talking about how the athletes will be focused on being paid. So instead of working, they think they can go and play a sport because it's more enjoyable and it's easier for some. Also, if a high school football prodigy reported that he chose Michigan not for its academic quality, tradition, or beautiful campus, but because it outbid all of the other suitors, a connection to the university's values would be lost, according to New Yorker. So this would turn college sports into a bidding war like the NFL. Next, I'll be talking about the athletes' education. So the athletes, in order to do better in their sport, they're going to be taking easier classes so they don't have to study. They're going to be skipping class so they can make it to practice. They're not going to be focused in their class. And they're not going to study. They're going to be studying for their plays, for their sports, and not studying for their math equations, for their English notes, for their tests. So if the tuition rates were raised, there could be some effects that the other students will have to pay more. Research shows that some students don't even know their fees are already paying for athletes. At Ohio University, for instance, 41% of revenue from the general fee of $531 per quarter for full-time students in 2010 went to intercollegiate athletics, but 54% of students didn't even know, according to Time. Next, I'll be talking about, since the athletes are going to be focused on getting paid, they're not going to have a purity of the game. There's not going to be a focus on the purity of the game. They'll also forget the real reason of why they're playing that game, for the love of the sport. And they're just going to be paying for a paycheck and not for the joy of the sport. Finally, I will be talking about what happens to an athlete's education. Since they're not going to be focused on their education, they're not going to be as smart as the other students. So they're going to be studying for their sport, they're not going to be studying for their classes, they're not going to be in class, and they're going to suffer later in life because they could lose job opportunities because the other students are more knowledgeable. So as you can see, there are a few problems with the NCAA athletes being paid. So the solution will have to be able to pay the athletes that don't have a job, that don't have time for a job, that need the money, and they have to find a way that they don't have to raise the tuition rates in order to pay the athletes. And it needs to be able to let the athletes focus on their grades while they're focusing on their sports. So a couple of the possible solutions would be the Federal Work Study Program, the raising scholarships to full scholarships, and payment from the NCAA. So the best solution was the Federal Work Studies Program because the athletes only need to be rescheduled as employees. And the FWS is federally funded program based on need. So they can make $4,000 during school and $3,000 during the summer. It might not be as much money, but it's more than not being paid anything. So therefore, it could be detrimental to NCAA athletes themselves and other students if NCAA athletes were paid. However, if we went to the Federal Work Study Program, the athletes could still be paid. So by doing this, start a petition and have everyone sign it and send it to colleges across the nation. Students won't suffer from raised tuition rates and not worry about paying for your favorite inflated candy bar.
Do you think those student athletes would actually have time to go to practice some games, study, and do the work study program?
So the work study program, it is like where you file. They would have them filed underneath the university. So by playing the sport, that would be considered your job. So they would be paid for playing. Does that answer your question?
How much will they be paid? Is it like a lot or?
Yeah, so they can be paid $4,000 during the school year and $3,000 during the summer. So that's better than not getting paid at all.
Is that for every sport, or is it vary from different sports, or what?
It could be filed for every sport if the university chooses to.
So are they gonna get paid that $4,000 and $3,000 and then a scholarship on top of that as well?
That is possible, or they could go away from it since they'll be saving money from the Federal Work Study Program.
So what do you think about athletic scholarships? Because isn't that basically them getting paid to play the sport?
Yeah, so scholarships are for the students to come to their school to play their sport. So if they were to go under the Federal Work Study Program, they could go away from the scholarships and you just have them paid by the Federal Work Study Program. Chelsea?
Why do you not believe that full scholarships is a better option? Because collegiate athletes do bring a major revenue into colleges. So shouldn't there be some type of full compensation for that?
The thing is, they would have to find money for the full scholarships because the scholarships are funded by the school and by the government. So unless they find some other sort of funding for the full scholarships, they would have a hard time, and that's where they would raise the tuition rates.
Doesn't the work study program be funded by the college as well?
No, that's funded by the government.
Do you think their pay should depend on what division the school is?
That would depend on how, the Federal Work Study Program is dependent on need, so I'm sure by the divisions, it would probably pay less.
Even though a Division III scholar, they can't give out scholarships, would they still be paid?
Again, it just depends on the need. I mean, they could if they wanted to.
All right, thank you.